All right, we're going to go ahead and call the City Commission meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year, because I guess we really haven't been in the City Commission chamber since before the Christmas holidays. So happy to be back at it and excited to kick off 2023 with roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Brunick.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Maibaum.
Present.
Minor.
Here.
Schramm.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Villanueva.
Present.
Mayor Moser.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherter.
Here.
All right, moving on in routine business. I would ask for approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 22nd, 2022.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any comments, corrections on the minutes? Anybody in the public? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right. Next we have on the agenda is a schedule of bills. What is your pleasure? Move to pay the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Johnson.
Aye.
Maibaum.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunick.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 4 under routine business is the city manager's report, so I will turn it over to City Manager Leo.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the Commission, and to the public. Our mission is to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. So with that, just a couple of things this evening. I've communicated with you regarding snow plowing and solid waste recycling and our schedule disruption there. We are back on schedule, so I can verify that Monday routes were picked up today, and we're all caught up on solid waste and recycling. We appreciate everyone's patience when it comes to our snow removal process. We did have some tows associated with our snow emergency, and we're still working on some of the snowbirds with our police department. But I think all said and done, we did a good job moving that amount of snow. We haven't had that amount of snow at least in 10 years, so a good job to all our crews and everyone involved there. We did have one citizen who is on a Friday solid waste route, and as you recall, we canceled solid waste collection for one of the Fridays. I believe it was the Friday just before New Year's Eve, the 29th, and postponed that to the following Friday due to weather and due to needing to have our solid waste and recycling folks help out on snow removal. And that individual contacted me. He's requesting a discount on his solid waste bill, claiming that not only did we not pick up that one Friday, which we verified that we missed a number of other Fridays in the month of December. We can't confirm or deny that. We hadn't heard that from our driver, or they weren't familiar with that. Of course, you know, that's just their statement versus what we're saying. But I did say, you know, that's not something I can administratively make a decision on. So I told him I would ask you and get back to him if there was any flavor on the commission for discounting anybody's solid waste or recycling bill that was a Friday route. Not hearing any interest in that, so I will provide the feedback to the citizen. Speaking of citizens, if you see Diane Reese in town, please congratulate her. For those of you who don't know, she was named Citizen of the Year. I would expect, as per usual, you'll see a proclamation before you at some point regarding that honor. So great for her, and certainly a great contribution to our community over her many years of service in different aspects. I don't have anything other to bring forward to you unless you have questions for me.
Amy, under the consent agenda, we have a work session proposed. Can you share with the commission what you're thinking for a topic since
bet.
it's during the consent?
Sure, you bet. Luke Yeomans and Todd Larson and I have been discussing our special events coming up. As you may know, we have a special events application currently. Mr. Yeomans would like to make some updates to that, also make it available as sort of a form that can be filled out and submitted electronically. But also we need to make some changes in terms of what we're asking of the public for events and what we are able to do as a staff for events. So we want to run by some of those changes with you. We also want to talk about the special events rates and get your feedback on the rates. We currently charge a very nominal fee for special events, and wondering if there's any interest and desire in increasing that rate. I think the amount we're charging is almost maybe enough to cover the cost of reviewing the application once, not really any of our labor involved. And so we want to talk with you about that and get your feedback on that before we present you with any actual changes to the special events application or present you with rates to discuss. So we'd like to bring that forward as a discussion, and then if there's anything that comes out of that, bring forward action later on.
Perfect. Thank you for going through that. Before we get to the consent agenda, are there any questions for the city manager?
Amy, regarding snow cleanup, are those efforts still ongoing, or because I still get questions from the public?
Yes,
about it.
we're in what I call the slicking up mode now. So certainly taking calls if someone has something that was overlooked or needs to be readdressed. Crews are still hauling in some cases. Also, I think that when we do get a car removed, we want to go back to that street and kind of clear that up. So we still have some ongoing things happening until our next event.
Any other questions?
The red sticker that was placed on vehicles that were on the street, was that, I had people ask me, and I guess I saw some, but I didn't stop and read what they say. Is that a violation, a ticket violation, or a notice to move the vehicle or be towed type or notice?
Well, to be honest, Mason, I'm not sure or Commissioner Schramm, excuse me, what the color our tickets are. I know we do give a notification and then go back around to ticket. So I would have to ask Chief Foote, who must have gotten called away, and I'm not sure. Ross, do you have any insight there?
I know that the tickets generally will go under the wiper blades. They're just a white.
This is a notification.
Carbon.
Can we review what a snow emergency is so the public is well aware of what that means?
Sure. Before I do that, Commissioner Villanueva, may I just get verification, Chief Foote, that the red stickers that are placed on people's vehicles, those are just notifications that they're parked illegally during the snow emergency?
So the red tags are giving the person notification that they have 48 hours to move the vehicle. We can ticket them. We just chose not to ticket them at that time. And then if we had to tow them from that location, we would also ticket them at that time.
And I will do my best, Chief Foote, before as you're walking in, Commissioner Villanueva asked if we could review what the snow emergency is, and we haven't issued a snow emergency in some time. Typically when we plow, or typically when we've plowed in recent snowfall events, the snow has been, I guess, light enough that we have not issued that snow emergency. So when we issue a snow emergency, we ask that people remove their cars from the street, and we will ticket and tow. Now, sometimes we issue the snow emergency and we're unable to get a tow operator, but the intent is that we're going to ticket and tow if you're not moving your car. So Where people can get that information would be on Facebook. We also, when we do ticket and tow for snow emergencies, we do a PSA, so we let our media outlets know as well. And I think also if you're signed up on Nixle, you will get a notification. I did get a text that will ticket and tow. And we usually indicate, when we'll be doing that. I think at times we've notified downtown business owners, or that notified when we begin the downtown, since they have a little, they have a little bit of different experience moving their cars around and using the lots. But good reminder to everyone, since we haven't done that for a number of years. And looks like Chief might have something to add.
The emergency snow routes, we try to make sure that the public is aware that we're going to do ticket and towing. One of the hard parts about the emergency snow routes is that they're emergency, so they are being plowed as much as possible by city staff throughout the day. That doesn't mean that they're still not going to come out and clean them up later in the day. So some people think that because the snow plow has already gone by, that they're not coming by again. And that's where we run into problems. So we try to get ahead of that as much as we can by letting people know, letting the community know that we're doing that tonight. We'll let the downtown area know when we can. So give them as much advance notice as we can.
Thank you, Chief. Also, I just want to say thank you to all the city staff. That was a lot of snow, and that was a lot of work. I know I moved snow for hours that day, so thank you for all the hard work. That was quite the snowfall.
Other questions? Yeah, I know Commissioner Villanueva, I know I was quoted in the paper today as saying I thought we did a great job with, what we had, as Amy shared. We had 2 plows go down and other things. So I think with the amount of snow and all of the extra streets and all of that are now in our community, I thought they did a good job in as much of a timely manner as they could. So I appreciate that too as well. All right, seeing no other mics come on, then I would move on to public appearances. This is the time and the place for people in the public to appear in front of the City Commission on something not on the agenda tonight. Seeing no movement forward to the mics, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Number 1 is setting the date of January 23rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. Here in the commission chambers for our next work session. And as Amy shared earlier, talking about special events, application and fee. Number 2 is to establish January 23rd, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a transfer of ownership of a retail on-sale liquor license for January 1, 2023 to December 31st, 2023 from RW Capital LLC, Don Anderson, President, doing business as Minerva's Grill and Bar, to LLTD1 LLC, Kimberly Ocampo, owner, doing business as Boss's Pizza and Chicken Sports Bar, that is located at 1607 East Highway 50. Number 3 is to establish January 23rd, 2023 as the date for the public hearing on the request for a special events on sale liquor license for one day, February 4th, 2023, from BPO Elks Lodge 994, Lindsay Stoats, Secretary, located at 504 West 27th Street, to the NFAA at 800 Archery Lane. Number 4 is to establish January 23rd, 2023 as the date for the public hearing on the request for a special events on sale liquor license for 2 days, February 10th and 11th, 2023 from BPO Elks Lodge 994, Lindsay Stoats, Secretary, located at 504 West 27th Street for an event at the NFAA located at 800 Archery Lane. Number 5 is to establish January 23rd, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events on sale liquor license and a special on sale wine retailer's license for one day, February 16th, 2023 from the Center, Chris Thury, Executive Director, located at 900 Whiting Drive. And number 6 under the consent agenda is to establish January 23rd, 2023 as the date for the public hearing on the request for a special events on sale liquor license for February 18th, 2023, from Hanton Incorporated, Ben Hanton owner, doing business as Ben's Brewing Company, located at 222 West 3rd Street, for an event at the NFAA located at 800 Archery Lane. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Any discussion by the commission? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right, moving on to old business. Number 1 is a second reading and a public hearing with the City Commission acting as the Zoning Board of Adjustment regarding Memorandum 23-06, a public hearing to consider a variance from the city's maximum front yard fence height in a residential district. That address is 203 West 25th Street, Travis Aaron's and Kelly Aaron's owners. I might start, Dave is at the mic. Do you want me to start with, okay, I will start with Mr. Mingo to walk us through what is being requested tonight, what is in the variance, and kind of just walk us through everything before I ask for the pleasure of the commission.
Sure, no problem. Good evening. The applicants Travis and Kelly Arns are requesting variance that would allow them to construct a fence over 4 feet tall in their front yard. That would typically be the language associated with a request. As you can see from the pictures, the fence is already in place as it was constructed in violation of city code this late summer, early fall timeframe. So after it was constructed, the applicants came forward to make the request for variance, which we proceeded to run through the standard process of public hearing at the Planning Commission and this Zoning Board of Adjustment hearing here. Variances are based on land use related hardships. If they are to be recommended for approval, the Planning Commission had a lengthy discussion and heard from the applicant at their December meeting. The true test for granting a variance is a land use related hardship that approaches confiscation of the use of property, and also is specific or unique physical limitations to the property in question. Again, land use related and physical limitations related to the property. Based on those tests, and there not being any identifiable unique physical limitations on the property, staff is recommending that the proposed variance be denied. The Planning Commission in their discussion also recommended that the proposed variance be denied. There's a fair amount of other information in your packet related to our city ordinance, South Dakota codified law, and also court cases, not just in South Dakota, but beyond that, as far as planning practices are concerned. And based on all that, again, there isn't any evidence of a land use hardship on the site. Approval of variance, just as a reminder, does require 2/3 of the commission to move forward and be approved. And with that, I'd be willing to try and answer any questions.
Are there questions of Mr. Mingo?
Dave, is the fence that we're seeing in these pictures, excuse me, so the fence that we're seeing in these pictures, it is still up?
That is correct. I think the easiest way to visualize it is in combination in looking at the site plan where you have the lot as pictured from above with the teal colored or blue colored line. That's the fence that you're seeing in the pictures that was built approximately 6 feet high, and that's the part of the fence that's in the defined front yard setback that is not in compliance with code.
Dave, if I remember from the Planning Commission, were the owners notified or instructed about the height of the fence prior to its construction, or was it constructed without that knowledge being passed on to them?
There was contact between the owners and my staff regarding fence height regulations in the front yard prior to the fence being constructed.
And it's a typical process for a fence to have a permit issued prior to construction?
So we do not require permits for fences over 6 feet tall. We've had that discussion on a number of occasions, and there's pros and cons to requiring permits for everything, just like we don't require permits for yard sheds less than 120 square feet. That being said, they still do have setback requirements they have to meet and height restrictions that they have to comply with. There is a process in Yankton where in rear yards you can go through a permit process for fences over 6 feet high, and at that point, things like foundations need to be reviewed for wind loads and other things. So there is no permit process for fences in rear yards 6 feet or less, or fences in front yards 4 feet or less.
Dave, I was reading in the packet that the homeowners are claiming a part of the reason for this is for the safety of their children. That does not constitute a hardship then under the rules of the variance. How does that work?
Yeah, so by definition, variants are reviewable for land use purposes only. So if there was something unique as far as the site is concerned related to land use, that is technically all that can apply. And there's also documentation out there that specifically references that personal circumstances are not the basis for granting a variance.
And in looking at these pictures, Dave, that was provided in the commission packet, I do see a section of that fence is shorter than 6 foot. Is that correct? Am I looking at that picture correct, of the part that's up against the garage?
Yeah, and
appears
I
lower. Is that
believe-
a legal height, or is that? I'm just looking at, I see two different sizes of the fences there.
Yeah, so there's a part of it right next to the garage that appears from a distance to be a gate. And the applicant can probably answer that question better than I can. That section where that is located is also in excess, appears to be in excess of 4 feet. We didn't go on site and measure it with a tape measure.
And can you elaborate too, so this is a corner lot, and how that is treated differently than from a lot that would, say, be in the middle of the street?
Yeah, so our code includes provisions for corner lots to have 2 front yards, which then, on the intersecting streets, which then by default means there's only 1 side yard and 1 rear yard. We're typically on an internal lot, there's 1 front yard, 1 rear yard, and 2 side yards. On corner lots, there's by definition 2 front yards.
And Mr. Mingo is the owner of the property here tonight.
It's right there, Travis is right there.
Mr. Aaron's, would you like to, since this is part of a hearing, is there anything you would like to share with the commission?
Yeah, I wrote a little something, but to address the question that was asked by Mr. Strom, we did, my wife actually called the city to ask about the fence height, and she talked to, his name right here, Mr. Greg Homestead, and he said not to build the fence 6 foot. He did not say to stay under 6 foot, or under 4 foot. So we built it at 6 foot. My father-in-law actually built it, and he built it on a hot day, and he was going to cut off 6 inches of the bottom of the picket, so we would be under what Greg said. So it was unfortunate that we didn't do that. He might not have come and looked at it. But nevertheless, it doesn't really matter now. One of the reasons 6-foot fences are not allowed in the building setback line is because people backing the cars out of driveways. This would affect the neighbor to the south of us. According to Dave Mingo, the neighbor is fine with the current fence as long as it doesn't get near to the sidewalk in the future. The existing fence separating our properties next to her driveway was already 6 foot before we moved in, so the rest of the fence that we built did not change her sight lines for backing out of her driveway. There are numerous ordinance violations with 6-foot fences and bushes greater than 4 foot in front yards that act as fences. I also see a lot of big blue spruce trees that have branches that reach out over sidewalls that cause more of a sightline hazard at intersections than our fence does. In the previous meeting a month ago, Dave Mingo states that other cities have 6-foot fences around the property for security reasons. This is why we need our current fence to stay at 6 foot instead of 4 foot. It's for safety reasons for 2 autistic children who would climb over a 4-foot fence. We have 2 letters, it should be in your packets. One is from Owen's, our son's psychologist, and the other one is from his pediatrician, Dr. Willman, explaining the need for a 6-foot fence for their safety and the extra room for them to continue to achieve developmental milestones they are very behind on. We need quick access to our house as our door is on the west side for emergencies, injuries, and in case our son has a seizure. It would be impossible for mom or a sitter to keep 2 special needs kids from climbing over a 4-foot fence. The lots on our block are all equal sizes. The corner lot should have been larger since the house cannot be built on what is considered the 2 front yards and a corner lot, which gives us less yard space. This is something the Planning and Zoning Committee should have taken into account when planning the lots many years ago. I don't know if it was 50 years ago or when it happened, but it basically creates a hardship on our property for raising our children. If you don't want to grant the variance, the fence should be amended to allow for taller fences for people who need it for safety measures. There are other properties not properly planned in other parts of town where it leaves no backyard for property owners. At the Planning and Zoning meeting last month, Dave Mingo stated minor property limitations that prevent ordinance compliance and are common to a number of properties should be addressed by amending the ordinance. Clearly we have minor property limitation on our corner lot because it reduces our backyard, and our backyard is not accessible to our house currently from the patio door, which is on the west side. There should be an amendment to the ordinance since there are multiple properties with similar limitations. An ordinance change is needed for situations where increased safety is needed when yard use is limited. And the rate of autism is increasing. In 1970, it was 1 in 10,000. In 2000, it was 1 in 150. In 2020, it was 1 in 54. In 2021, it was 1 in 44. Some researchers have also estimated the rate may be 1 in 2 children in the next decade. Dave Mingo said city commissioners have the power to approve and make the final decision on our fence variance regardless of their recommendation. When it was proposed to close down part of the Summit Activity Center, the people said no, and you listened. The city commissioners are elected to serve the people. I am looking for someone to speak up and support the 2-foot taller fence. One of 2 ways: grant the variance, or by amending the ordinances Dave Mingo talked about in the last meeting to add protection to special needs families. I have a question for the commissioners. Do any of you want to help us? Thank you. Any questions?
I do. I don't know if you heard my question to Mr. Mingo, but in looking at the pictures of your fence line, I do see you have a section of that fence that's lower than 6 foot.
Yeah, it's the gate, and when my father-in-law built it, he just did it for now, and then you just replace like 4 pickets to make it 6 foot when the kids get older, but it's just so they could reach over. I don't know why he did it like that. I'll just have to fix it if I can go to 6 foot.
Ross, do you kind of want to walk everybody through kind of what the options are and what
Yeah.
we're considering tonight?
Yeah. All right. So there's a couple things at play here that Mr. Arns brought up. Thank you for your presentation. A couple things to talk about. The amendment of the ordinance would potentially be a way to address this issue community-wide and is probably the preferred method than granting variances that should apply to everybody. However, that is not on the agenda tonight. So as part of your commission discussion, I would leave it to, if you're going to say anything at all, say, city manager, I think we should address that in the upcoming work session or something. But beyond that, this isn't the time and place to debate that specifically. Second of all, I wish to point out that this is one of those matters that we consider quasi-judicial. And you guys are sitting as, pretend you're judges in a black robe. It's your job to sit in judgment over the rights of citizens. And that also means you have to apply the appropriate legal standard that Dave Mingo laid out for you. If you do not, you subject the action of the commission to be overturned in a court of law if you vote contrary to what the evidence presents relative to that legal standard. So this is one of those times that sitting up here may be very uncomfortable doing that job, but you are limited to applying the law to the facts as you've heard them. So try to focus on that as best you can as you debate and cast your vote.
Thanks, Ross, for walking us through that. Are there other questions from the commission for either Mr. Mingo or Mr. Ahrens? Mr. Ahrens or Ahrens?
It's Arns.
Ahrens, I figured.
Dave got it right. It's
I
okay.
figured I said that wrong as soon as it came
okay.
out. I apologize
It
for
happens
that.
all the time.
Probably question then for Dave, I suppose. Have you or staff already spoken with the Arns family about potential outcomes of tonight's meeting? So if the city commission were to decline the variance request, the fence, it would seem, is standing and it would have to be removed. I heard mention tonight that maybe there was some confusion when the request was originally put in with city staff. So I don't know if there's going to be some costs associated with that fence coming down or not, but just curious if you've had some conversations already with the homeowner about the potential outcome for tonight.
We have not discussed what lies ahead as far as the direction that might be taken. If the variance is denied, we would commence our standard process for gaining compliance for something that's out of compliance, and that would involve a notice to correct the situation. And then, there's subsequent processes after that occur legally if the applicant doesn't comply with a notice to correct. And that's the part where it sort of leaves our hands and ends up in the city attorney's office as far as staff or the city commission is concerned. As far as answering the question, there's 4 people on our staff that answer that question. I'm one of them. I wasn't the one in this case that answered the question. I am 100% confident that all 4 of your staff know the provisions of the ordinance well, and I wasn't witness to the conversation, but I know all four of us know the provisions of that section of the ordinance very well. It's a question that people call and ask all the time, not that folks are asking to build something over 4 feet tall, but they call and ask, what are the regulations associated with a fence at a certain location on their property, whether it be front yard, backyard, or whatever. We get that question in our office on a very regular basis.
Dave, along the lines of questioning from Commissioner Maibaum, we're in the middle of winter. Is there a time frame that if this isn't approved tonight, that would be enforced with us being in the middle of winter, or how does that work?
So, again, it would be a standard process where notification would be provided. And of course, we take things like the weather conditions into account when we explain to the person in violation or the property in violation how long we're going to allow them for compliance. Typically 30 to 60 days is very common for requesting compliance on items that are not conforming.
Other questions? If there are no questions, then I would ask, what is the pleasure of the commission?
I move that we deny the variance request.
I would second that. And I would just like to say that as a mother and as a social worker, this is a very difficult situation, and we do not enjoy making things harder for people in this community. But there are rules that we have to follow, and so I will be voting to deny the variance.
We do have a motion and a second in front of the commission acting as a zoning board. However, I do want to also reserve this time if there's any further comments from the commission, questions. Is there anybody else in the public that would also like to say anything?
I have
Yep,
one more thing.
go ahead.
Basically, I knew the variance was going to get denied, but my question to I don't know if it's this board or the planning board, you're kind of above the planning board, but are you going to look into amending the ordinance? Or looking at amending it, not amending it, but looking at amending means changing things to the ordinance? Through the zone, maybe not you guys, but through the zoning board.
Sure.
Or Dave.
I see commissioners nodding their head. I mean, I do agree. I think this could be something we look at maybe at a work session and have that conversation so that we can get a better understanding of opportunities or special circumstances, as you have mentioned, could be a possibility. So I do think even if this is voted down once the final vote is taken, I don't think it's done forever. I think it does make sense to maybe have that conversation at a work session. We do periodically get people coming in front of us asking for a variance to one of our zoning rules, if you'd call it, or whatever you want to call that. So never hurts to every once in a while review what those are and see. I don't even know how long this variance has been in place, so maybe periodic review of some of that does make sense.
I'd just say we do have an upcoming comprehensive plan process, and this is, based on this situation, already on my list of about 30 things probably that I think, warrant further discussion. I'm not saying I'm in a position to recommend for or against any one of those 30 things at this point in time, but they warrant further discussion as a part of a broader community planning process, and that'll be happening over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I think that's the place to discuss this because it'll be pretty intensive, pretty inclusive process. So there'll be room for a lot of discussion.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, just over time, statistics and situations are increasing or changing, so I always think it's good and timely to look at that in reference to that. Other statements, questions in front of the zoning board tonight?
So I just want to ask, so we are going to talk about that. That's going to be addressed then for sure. We don't have to officially ask for that. That's just going to happen.
I think you just asked, so I think we.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
Seeing no other comments or questions, roll call.
And just to remind you, the motion is on the table, on the floor, is to deny the variance. Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 2, under old business, is consideration of memorandum 23-10 regarding shade structures at Sertoma Park. I don't know, Amy, if you want to walk the commission through all of the options here, if you want Mr. Larson to do that, but I will turn it over to one of you.
I'll take a stab at it. Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, remember back in December, if you will remember the bleak December, no, I'm just kidding. You approve $50,000 from the BBB for purchasing and installation of permanent commercial grade shade structures. You have some images of those. The cost of those shade structures were $32,000. When we got the quote to install them, that came back at $27,000. So the total for that project would actually be $59,000. Those shade structures are 16 by 16. The Friends of Sertoma has looked a little further into the other option, which they looked at initially, and have now requested that they'd like to purchase 4 larger cool cow structures, and those structures are 32 by 32, so throw much more shade. That total for those 4 would be $18,000. These are kind of quote-unquote portable, so they wouldn't require an installation process, less expensive, but we would recommend, if you go that route, that we leave them there, because they'll probably be in a concrete sort of more stationary type structure. You have images of those as well. We told Friends of Sertoma that, look, we can only do what you have authorized us to do when we don't have, it budgeted, and it wasn't budgeted into something that you directly approved it independently. So, I don't think either Todd or I have strong feelings. I don't want to speak for him, but of course, I talked to you about my opinion. When we have something in our parks structure in my memo, I'm happy to do that as well. And I also talked with here at this meeting, if you want to hear more about it. I also talked with some of you independently about this, and so some of that's just about aesthetics and what you think is acceptable for a park system and what you want for a park system, and what you think. And some of you folks are down at the ball fields, and so you'll have maybe a better gauge on what would be acceptable and amenable and all those things. So, but I did say personally that, perhaps you want to go ahead and actually make more of an expenditure and go ahead with what was planned. You could also go with the cool cow shade structures and spend just the $18,000. You could, decide to go with 2 or fewer, or 3 of the smaller structures, and then budget for different, more of them in future budget years in capital. So you have a lot of options, and you might think of another alternative. I did visit with a staff person who is related to, is down at Sertoma for baseball, softball, and said, maybe there's a way you can wrap those to make them look better if you were to go with the cool cow structures. But we're happy to do with whatever it is that the commission would like, but we do have to ask you and get your direction based on the fact that you took a vote before on what to spend.
So there's some of these cool cow structures by the SAC, is that correct?
There's one there.
I haven't seen those. Do they look okay? Do they work well? I have concerns about using a cattle shade structure.
Well, it looks
in
like
one of our permit
how it is in your packet, I think. And I've seen them in actual cattle yard usage. I haven't seen them in a parks type usage, but we probably wouldn't put the tire there. We'd put something, a little more permanent. But, it is what it is. But, it is also a lot less money, and maybe it doesn't have to be fancy too. So that's at the commission's desire.
Although I would mention, I've been to the SAC several times, and that tire is actually used as a seating area as well. So depending on how you put that in, there are people that sit in that and watch the ball games because it's under the shade. So it is
One man's
available
tire
for
is another man's
seat. Yes.
I do think that also, if I'm not mistaken, I think I went by it today, and one of the coroners is down on the ground, I believe. I don't know that for sure, but.
Yeah, that's
is that
been for
correct?
some time. I think that's the school's responsibility as they place it there. Is that correct, Todd? Or whose is that? That doesn't belong to the city, I don't believe.
youth softball had that moved in with the idea that it was going to get moved out, and then the company just never came and moved it back out. So it'll have to be addressed in the spring. Now with the snow and the wind, it came down, so.
And that, the cool shades, they do not, you're not removing those canopies on those units, unlike the other, I'm guessing the other units are like at the aquatic center?
My understanding is those canopies do come off in the off-season and be stored, and then we'd put them back on.
For the cool cow?
No, on the
permanent.
On the permanent
Yes.
shade structures that you currently have approved. The cool cows stay up and they,
And are flat, and we get snows, and I can see potential issues there.
yeah, I don't know about their performance.
Todd, what are the Friends of Saratoga, what would their preference actually be, if you can answer that?
Well, when they knew that the permanent ones were the ones that had been voted for, Jeff Steppa got a hold of me when he was back in town and said they wanted to meet again. So I met with him and Dan Del Forge and Brad Mosier, and their choice would be the cool cow based on, you get a lot more shade at 32 by 32, so you're paying a lot less per square foot of shade. And that's just basically what they were basing it on, so the three of them when we met were okay with the cool cow.
Do you know, are there other communities that use the cool cow structures for this purpose?
I can't say with certainty.
I would have to think that aesthetically, I think the professional shade would look much nicer. I also realize too, with the professional shades going up and coming down every year, there's city labor involved with that. But I also would have to think that when they come down for the remainder of the season, you have yet less UV damage and just sunlight on them the whole time, which would degrade those covers, I would assume. So I would be more in favor of just, I'm not sure how we pay for that, but I think we should recommend the professional shades as opposed to the cool cows myself.
I would agree with Commissioner Villanueva on that. Also, just the design, like the engineering of those units. One is designed to be used in public use, and the other one is designed to be used for cattle. And I think that there's a cost associated with the design process. I understand that, we were trying to do 4. I guess I would be in favor of trying to do 2 and looking forward, and if everything works great, to in the future put another 2 up. I think, at the last meeting, or not the last meeting for Christmas, but the meeting before that when we approved that, I think I'm not comfortable with going with more. I think if it comes back at too expensive for right now, that you scale it back, but still move forward with it.
Just so the commission's aware, I don't have a motion in my recommendation, but I am saying that if you want to go ahead with what you have already approved, there is an additional cost because of the installation. So I'd be most comfortable having a motion made that the additional funds be spent. We could figure out where that would be best from. We could probably supplement that amount in parks. But I just want to make sure everyone understands that there's not I don't have a motion in the recommendation.
But I don't think, is that what you're saying, Ben, that's not what you're saying, is it? You're saying to do 2 instead of?
Do 2 and 2 instead of 4. 2 and 2.
Sorry to do my Chuck Woolery here, but yeah, to do 2.
Okay,
units.
gotcha. In which case, I don't know that the installation will be cut in half, but it would go down. So we would still be under that $50,000 mark, in which case you wouldn't have to make a motion. So thanks for clarifying that, because I understood something different.
And in my mind, $9,000, give or take, over what we already approved to get them all done and not have to do 2 separate installs, which are going to be more expensive than doing 4 installs at the same. I understand not total money, but they charge, I'm assuming the contractor charge more to come back and do 2 than if they just did all 4 versus 2 at 2. In my mind, adding $9,000 to our total allotment is worth it.
So Todd, looking at, and this is dated June of 2022, this is the capital improvements plan for Sertoma. So we're in 2023 now, and looking ahead to 2025, we got some pretty expensive upgrades that are listed there for Sertoma. And just kind of curious to maybe understand where your head is now on what you see as, I guess, potentially some big upgrades at Sertoma in the next 2-3 years.
The biggest expense would be the concession stand, restroom, comfort station building. Has probably seen its better day. It's functional, and we'll have a new concessionaire in there now this spring again, with our other one having some ill health. But that is really where our biggest need is. The asphalt around that in the middle section has seen its better day. So if we go with asphalt again, or if we concrete around that middle section, the plaza area around that concession stand would be the big one. And then through the years, there's smaller fence repairs that we do. But as it was spelled out in that capital plan that we talked about with Stockwell brought us through, and they talked to softball, baseball. There were some sidewalks on the north and the south side as a part of that, but the big, by far and large, the biggest expense now at this point will be the concession stand, restroom, changing area for umpires, storage, if we keep going down and trying to make improvements.
And Todd, remind me, is there a big tournament this year being held at Sertoma Park?
Last week of July, youth softball has a national, regional, national, however they name it.
And I'm just thinking too that having 2 fields with shade, 2 fields without shade for that big tournament, there wouldn't be shade there if they didn't do anything. We didn't approve it already, but I just think the optics of it would be nice to have shade at all 4 of those main seating areas.
And I agree with you, Mason. However, I do think that we've already allocated $50,000, and we're doing basically, it's 100% funding of this project. I would be in favor of sticking with that if they can fundraise $9,000 to have 4 shades on everything. If that money could be developed. Otherwise, I think I'm comfortable with doing the 2, and then in the future, hopefully being able to do another 2. But if they can also come up with $9,000 towards shade through fundraising, I'd be all in favor of us continuing doing what we're doing, what we had said we were going to do 2 meetings ago.
Todd, I do have a question for you. Since you're here, what is your recommendation?
I would recommend the professional built ones, not the cool cow shade ones.
Todd, do you foresee ever the fields that are to the west of Sertoma Park, the fields that are closest to the residential properties, do you ever see them eventually expanding further east to the point where they would be considered the same full-size type fields as are on the east fields, simply because we would then have 4 full-size fields that could accommodate bigger and different tournaments than what we're limited to right now? And I just bring that up because I've developed a little bit of hesitation, I suppose, over the permanent structures, if there is the possibility that we can make that happen. And I know we'd have to move poles. I know we'd have to, probably, certainly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head the actual difference in length down the foul lines there on the big fields to the east versus the small fields to the west. Yeah, it would take you would need to move, you'd be moving the backstops on those two west fields further east and the fence line along the fields to the east. And then which was brought up at the last meeting, the foul ball issue in the middle part, but between fields. At that point, when you've eliminated the space between the fields, you'd have to go with a lot taller fences on both sets of fields to keep balls from not only getting into the other playing fields, and you're not going to eliminate all of them, but those line drive ones, and especially for people walking in and out of the facility. Yeah, I would have to, without, again, having all those numbers right in front of me, you could get probably closer to having 4 fields that are roughly the same dimensions versus what we have now, which is 2 very smaller fields compared to the 2 bigger fields to the east.
So then I would definitely imagine that if we're talking about completely rehabbing the, the comfort station, the concession area with bathrooms and everything, if that's going to get completely redone, where it is currently would not work if we're going to be expanding the fields to the west, simply because we're going to have to,
Yeah,
in that case, you'd have to move the.
if the flavor was to have 4 fields closer to the same size, maybe not exactly the same size, but a lot closer, you would need to do a whole study of that complex with drainage, and because again, it's flat other than to the outfields on those 2, the ditch to the west, and there is a ditch to the south. Otherwise, it's pretty, I guess there's a ditch to the east too, but it's a pretty flat area. So you would need to study the drainage and then have a comprehensive plan, because when you start talking about moving fences, you're gonna have to move lights, irrigation. That would be a multi-million-dollar with the comfort station, restroom, storage, umpire changing station. You're talking a couple $2 million or more probably to get a complex with 4 fields similar sized.
So I guess then, where my head is at, especially if that is something that, potentially is, coming down the pike in the next 3 years, maybe it wouldn't be smart for us to invest in something that we're going to have to engineer around and that we're going to have to potentially pull out. And that if we're talking more about, well, first of all, I don't think anybody would ever say Sertoma Park is fancy, and that's okay, because it's kind of part of the vibe down there. And I don't think a lot of ball players would say, I want to only play at a fancy park. But if we were to do a cool cow shade for each of the fields for the next several years, I mean, it's a portable piece of equipment, and it's possibly also the kind of equipment that we could surplus if we wanted to, or just maybe offer up for other areas for rentals further down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would probably disagree with that, in that we're talking about a single pole going down, and if we're talking about a multi-million-dollar project, I think we can pull a pole up and reuse it if need be. Also, if again we're going back to using 2 shade structures, Todd, would we be moving 1 backstop, 2 fields? Because again, that would lead to the 2 fields. If we were to just do 2 shade structures now, we would do it on the fields that we wouldn't be moving the backstops, and then on the fields that they would, if that was the plan, if they were to move those backstops, I think they would put in backstops probably more like what are on the north fields, where you could attach shade structure to those, because you're going to be ripping that out and replacing that at that time. So I guess the permanence of the shade structures, for me, I would rather do something that is designed for public use, would be my opinion.
Todd, what is 3 years, like what you're thinking as far as a big master renovation of Sertoma? Or I guess I just bring it up because we're saying 3 years, but I'm going to guess a big project like that would probably take longer than that. Or what, in your mind is kind of the timeline for potentially looking at a big overhaul of Sertoma Park, if that is in the future?
Well, I guess, again, the capital improvement, to back up, to walk through where we're at today, the capital improvement budget that we've been working through started with the outdoor fields master plan that we did with Stockwell back in 2000, again, 11, 12, whenever, 13, when we got it finally finalized. So that was based on, back in time, trying to find ground to do soccer, softball, youth, and adult, price tag 23 million plus or whatever. They had also identified 2 million worth of projects to do in our current outdoor facilities. So if there's been $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 expenses, we've been knocking some of those off. New bleachers at Sertoma behind the home plates and things like that. So we've done a little bit of stuff. The concession stand was a part of what they looked at. Stockwell never looked at redoing that facility. So that would be a new discussion to have that we would need to sit down. Again, we really, at that point, if we're going to talk about redoing fields at Sertoma, we should sit down with youth softball, adult softball, and youth baseball and talk that through and see again where everybody, and Tony was in those meetings last spring, winter when we had those. They've created that Friends of Sertoma group. They're trying to do small fundraising to make small improvements like the jocks boxes that are below the home plate, batters boxes, catcher's area on each field. They've now talked about doing taller netting, not changing the backstops, keeping the fence that's there, but trying to add netting to it to help with the, so piecemealing together small improvements to the facility. So what I had been placing in the budget, we've run out of small projects to do. Now we're down to the bleachers underneath at Riverside Baseball Stadium don't meet any type of safety standards in today's world. And so that's going to be an issue. And again, we always address it with our insurance company saying we have a plan, we're working on, but other than the seating at Riverside Baseball, you've got 4 big sets of bleachers there that need to be addressed. That'll be a major expense. Again, not as major as a comfort station, concession stand, restroom, but it's going to be an expense. And they also addressed us last time with having taller fences down there for foul ball. If you're going to have those taller bleachers above the dugouts, again, they're worried about foul balls there too. So you'd have some of those. So some of those bigger pieces that were in that Stockwell plan are what are sitting out there. It's not news to anybody. We don't have funding for it. So you can say 3 years. We don't have the funding to do it. So it's just going to keep getting bumped and bumped and bumped until we come up with a plan to do something. So yeah, the permanent one poles, to move those poles could be done in the future. The cool cow shade ones obviously are a little easier to move, and you could use them at other facilities. Again, it's always the aesthetic look, whether you're going to Riverside Park with them or more out to the Summit Activity Center, and again, there is the one there. So a lot of different questions and things to look at, but we would need to sit down with a lot of groups and have a lot of discussions about renovating the entire Sertoma Park, the fourplex anyway at Sertoma Park.
Sounds like it'd be nice to have a sports authority like we were also talking about 10 years ago to help prioritize some of these projects. I just want to state in regards to adding another $9,000 to this project. I'm just concerned that we already budgeted this outside of our normal budgeting process. And to me, we're setting a precedent that any group that wants something now can come to us at any time and request money, and chances are we're going to grant it to them if we have money in the BBB. So to now add another $9,000 to this $50,000 that's out of our normal budgeting process, I have real concerns about what we're setting ourselves up for. if we chose to go that route.
And Commissioner Johnson, just so you know, they didn't, they're not asking for additional line. That's just what the installation came back at. So had they known what the total cost would have been prior to, I think they would have come with that amount. But we added that as if the commission decides to go with the original recommendation, the installation's going to cost a little more, or that 9,000.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I'm totally in support of adding shade structures to the park. It's just the method that we've gone about this. I think it puts us in a bad position potentially in the future. May not come to pass, but it certainly could.
Further discussion? And if not, does somebody have an idea on how they would?
Well, the one thing that I would want to just add then is I really do think the crux of this memo that we have in front of us is what Amy states here, which is providing exemplary spaces, right? So that's the motto that we put out there. And, like you mentioned, the Friends of Sertoma folks, they're perfectly happy with these cool cow shade structures. That's what they feel fits the vibe down at Sertoma. And city staff, to their credit, they live the motto out, and so there's some discrepancy there. So we feel, from the city perspective, let's go a little bit further. Let's make it more of a permanent structure. Let's make it look nicer, more exemplary, I suppose. And so, yeah, what we're setting ourselves up for is that kind of back and forth. If we have groups coming forward and saying, hey, we want to do this, not really exemplary. So then what do we do then? Do we turn them down, ask them to raise more money? Probably everything's on the table, but that's really what we're setting ourselves up for, I think. And again, I'm not, this isn't throwing blame at anybody, but again, I just think that's probably what this memo really comes down to, is how we interpret an exemplary space within city limits.
I think, excuse me.
Sorry. And I would think and I agree, it's that discussion. And like Nathan was saying, we're doing it outside of the budget, and part of the budget is planning. And I think you're right, Nathan, in that, we should be more careful with going outside of our budget season, because I think it lends more to this, where we kind of end up in a situation where everything isn't planned out quite as well as it probably should have been. But I don't think going more, throwing more at it is the answer. I think we've already approved it. I think we stick with what we've approved and move forward from there and try to do, better job moving forward.
Did have one last question. So these cool cow shades are a non-permanent structure. So when you do move this portable structure, how do you move this portable structure safely and easily?
I think we'd have to use a skid steer, wouldn't we, or maybe even something with forks if we have a concrete base on it. But I don't know that we'd think about moving them around too much. But my understanding is we'd need to either use something with forks, or like we did with the Lewis and Clark guys, or or we'd use a skid steer.
Probably even a payloader more than a skid steer.
Okay.
And it talks about a 24,000-pound truck ratchet strap around the perimeter. And maybe that's talking up above on the what the shade structure is. But yeah, you'd have to figure out how to get it loaded onto a trailer using the skid steer or the payloader. I don't think you would drive it down the road in front of hanging out of a bucket of the payloader. You would put it on a trailer, and we'd have to.
Agreed. And so that is my point, is that if the discussion is that these are portable, potentially portable if things change, I do think you have to keep in mind that these things are huge. There's a lot of weight there, and there's always potential for injury or damage to the structure itself.
Sorry, quick side question too. Sherco had actually donated a whole bunch of vinyl tarp for this. As originally envisioned, I think that might be in one of the buildings, or has that been returned, or what's the status of that material? Which I don't
That,
think
we
was
never
added
took
in.
ownership. We have the shade tarps. They donate the tarps for the 2 north fields, but we never took ownership of any tarps for the 4 south. So I don't know if Jeff Steppett was working with them or Dan Del Forge or who was working with them, but that I do not know. We do not have any tarp.
Sorry,
donated.
yeah, I delivered it from Sherco into one of those buildings, so.
Oh, okay. That would be is it sitting against the far west wall in the cold storage?
That could very well be.
That makes sense. So yes, no, it hasn't been returned. It's still sitting in cold storage.
So we haven't really given staff an answer here. If we're looking for consensus, I'm with Ben that we fund the 2 structures and try to plan for the next 2 in the next budget year.
Then I would need a motion if somebody wants to put something forward.
I would make a motion that we do 2 shade structures, that we funds for 2 shade structures, or we continue with our original 50,000, and if Friends of Saratoga can raise 9,000 to do 4 shade structures, then I think that we should honor that also.
I don't think we can put an either or in the motion, so you're going to have to, can we put an either or in the motion?
I don't see why you couldn't just make it really clear.
Okay.
Just make it really clear that it's one or the other, you know, I mean, they can effectively choose which, but, you know, it's not just an open-ended, otherwise we have a budget problem.
Whatever, Al's saying, if there's a second there, that'll be the motion.
Do you know, can you write that, Al?
I can write it tomorrow morning a lot easier than tonight, but however the commission chooses to do it, we'll figure out a way, so.
I'll second that.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second.
Let me reflect on this just for a minute again. You've already really approved 50,000 for 4, so I don't think you'd even need a motion to go on with that. Your limit is 50,000, and the challenge now is for staff to go back and talk to the group about, are you willing to raise 9,000 more?
I think part of what the direction we're giving is we don't want to use the cool cow structures. We want to use the structures we previously talked about. We're willing to fund 2 of them now because of the increased cost for 4. However, if they want to raise the extra 9,000 so that to add to our 50,000 and get all 4 at the same time, then we're saying that's fine. So if that makes sense.
I think I can get that down.
Okay. One thing to make it clear, the money can only be used for the project that's approved, not for the cool
Correct.
cows.
Well, as I like to say, that's clear as mud. All right.
So then I have a question for Todd. If we install 2 permanent structures on the east fields and then account for the labor that's going to be associated with that, what are we looking at? 2 structures and the labor associated with installing those 2 structures this spring.
I don't think we know that for 2, do we, Todd?
No, well, again, if you took what they quoted us for 4, if we cut it in half, you're talking $14,000.
Yeah, and what we don't know is if it's cut in half, you
Yeah.
know, or if it's, you know, if a lot of it's mobilization, it might be just cut by a quarter. So that's where the 9,000 comes in of.
So, okay, so then if we're cutting that in half, and then the cost of 4 temporary structures is 18,000 total, and we cut that in half, for 9,000, we can have 2 temporary structures on the west field, and we're still under 50,000. Is my math wrong?
Oh, so
No,
you're
but the
talking,
motion will have to change a little.
you're saying two cool cows and two permanent,
Well,
commercial grade?
I'm just doing the math in my head unless we want to budget more for the labor, just so that we're closer to being on the same page here, even if we're only installing 2 structures instead of 4. But, I mean, I go back to the original motion that I made back in November, and it was up to $50,000 for shade structures down at Sertoma. So if 2 of them end up being permanent and 2 of them end up being temporary, and that's less than 50,000, and Parks staff is on board with that, I don't know, why would we not do 4 fields when we've got 3 big tournaments coming up here?
We'll do whatever the commission wants. It wants to pay for, so yeah.
I just think it's short-sighted to not have 4 shade structures as soon as we can, because it's going to decrease the quality of activity down at the park if we don't have 4 shade structures, in my mind, just based on this small amount of time I've sat in those bleachers. Be nice to have. And to Tony's credit, I think that may be a viable option of having 2 permanent, 2 temporary, up to the 50,000 that we've already budgeted.
Then it would have to be, you'd have to amend the motion if that is a desire to move forward.
I myself would not be in favor of the cool cow structures. Again, going back to the engineering of them, I don't know. I guess this would be a question maybe for you would be, they're engineered for cattle. So if these are put into a public setting and the wind comes up and they come down on someone or a group of people, is there liability on this city's point of view because they are using a shade structure that was designed for cattle?
I want to jump in here for a second, and I think that's a really good point, is the liability. Taking a structure that's designed for cattle in the field. Last spring, we saw some unusual thunderstorms, and if there are people gathered at the park and weather's rolling in, they'll take cover, right? And then are we inviting the public to gather under those structures without really fully understanding their safety standards?
So a question of liability comes down to foreseeability, duty of the public to protect. What those structures are capable of is really dependent upon how they're engineered. And I'm not sure any one of us in this room has enough information to be able to answer that question. My guess is they are rated for a particular wind load, but if they're engineered for a cattle purpose, it would probably take a call to the company and maybe a conversation with their engineers to determine if that's really suitable for this sort of function. I don't know. But we probably want to know the answer to that before they go in. That's not something that any of us have discussed up to this point.
What if those same people are sitting on the bleachers underneath these permanent tarps when there's a thunderstorm rolling in?
I think you have, well, I'll let.
Again, it comes to their engineering. What's the purpose for which they were designed? And they're being sold for a particular purpose. This is the particular purpose for which those are sold and are theoretically engineered to be safe. So in the event that something like that would fail and it would fall and hurt somebody, chances are, yes, the city would be sued because it's our shade structure, but the city has purchased a thing that was not apparently fit for its particular use. It would essentially be a warranty claim or a design flaw claim against the manufacturer because it failed in its design purpose. Does that make sense? It's a little bit different. I'm not saying that the cool cow thing wouldn't work. I just don't think we know enough to know that that alternative use fits this particular application, that it's safe for that particular purpose.
Yeah, because in my experience, when the rain comes in, everybody leaves the field. And that is even, that's caused us to cancel tournaments before they even happen, just knowing that there may be the potential for thunderstorms at Sertoma Park, which is not turfed. And it'd be nice to have a huge fourplex that's fully turfed that can even accommodate thunderstorms, but that's a completely separate item to consider.
Todd, do you know if they explored temporary shade structures that were designed for human use instead of agricultural use, and what that cost would be?
No, the Friends of the Sertoma group had looked at these because youth softball has one at the SAC, and then they're made by a company out of Fordyce, Nebraska, and so it's more local than the Dakota Fence, which has offices in Sioux Falls, but it's based out of Fargo, and their landscape structures is who's making the permanent ones, and they're making them in Delano, Minnesota, and so they just, again, between more shade and less costs and having them closer to home, helping out the region, that was what they had so far looked at, so.
Mayor, I'd like to call the question.
All right, do I have to have a second on that?
Do you have a second?
No, we do not yet.
No.
We-
All right. Then,
I'll move to
I
table.
need to have a second and then a vote of,
I just moved to table.
I apologize, but I'm not aware of a second. Was there a second? Mr. Brunick had made the motion.
Commissioner Johnson made a second.
Okay, so we do have a second. Okay, and now we have a motion to table, which takes precedent, am I right, Mr.
I'm looking
Denner?
at the priorities. Robert's rules list here, hang on.
Please hold.
Yeah, motion to lay on the table would have priority here, yes. So you guys would have to, vote. Yeah, it's immediately voted, it's not debated.
And that also requires a second, right?
Sorry, I just put it away. Keep it open.
Dwayne, you got hold music?
However, there was another motion that was a privileged motion that had discussion, so you have to look at both of those. Speaking from somebody that did parliamentary procedure, FFA for 6 years, so.
Yeah, lay on the table does have privilege over call to question. Well, bear in mind, Robert's rules is not law. But to the extent they're trying to follow it.
Make a motion to take a recess.
All right. How about this? Since we can't debate a table, let's just see if there's a second. Does anybody else want to table this discussion? And my inclination is it dies for lack of a second, but I'll see if I can confirm that. Yep, second. It requires a second.
Under here, it says, "A motion to table is non-debatable. If seconded, a discussion ends and must be voted on immediately. Subsequent motion to take from the table is required to reopen the discussion."
Yeah, so that motion dies for lack of a second then, Mayor. So then we would immediately move to what's referred to as the call the question, but it's the motion to end debate and vote, which does require a second and then an immediate vote, and it does require a supermajority to immediately go into the vote on the motion on the floor.
I will second.
Okay, so we have a motion to call the
Okay.
question in a second.
So Jerry called the question. Nathan seconded Jerry's motion.
One at a time here, please.
Jerry called the question.
Okay, so there's a third thing in front of me right now. Okay, so, okay.
The call to table
Let me get it on my notes here.
died for lack of a
A
second.
motion and a second,
Mm-hmm.
and then whoever called the question, that doesn't,
Okay, so I'll clarify one more time. So the motion to table failed for lack of a second.
we get the first motion,
Okay,
and then we have,
call the question or end debate. That was seconded. So by Nathan.
okay, hang on just a second, let me get this real quick.
No problem.
This was Weber called the question, and Johnson seconded it, okay. Now keep going, please.
All right,
I
so
apologize.
that's okay. So no debate. We immediately vote, and if 6 of the 9 vote in favor, then discussion immediately ends, and then we move into the immediate vote on the motion on the table, on the floor.
Can we just make sure that the motion that I had done and Nathan had seconded, that we're clear on what that
I'll
motion
get to
is?
that in
Thank
We'll
you.
get to that. We're not there yet,
Just for
Commissioner
other
Brunick.
clarification, so really, we've got a motion and a second, and then we called the question in a second, and now we're gonna vote on that first.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
So when I announce roll call, we will be voting on call the question. If you vote in favor of calling the question, that means discussion stops, and we move to the motion that Commissioner Brunick brought up originally.
Immediate vote.
And it's an immediate vote because there is no discussion on it.
And for my notes, are we eliminating Tony's motion?
Yes, it died for lack of a second.
No, that doesn't even happen yet then, because the motion to call a question takes precedence. So the third motion, which is Tony's, doesn't even exist yet. We're still doing it on the first one.
Motion to table is the highest privileged motion of the ones that were on the floor. Yep.
Okay, wait a minute now. We had the motion to move to fund 2 permanents now and address the other 2 during the budget process unless Sertoma comes up. And we had a second to that. And then we had to call the question.
Yep, that's right.
So Tony's motion doesn't exist yet. We're voting on the call the question first.
Not necessarily, because under parliamentary procedure, someone can make the priority motion before that to table it, to pull it off the table, to discuss it later. And that failed for lack of a second. So now we're back to the next priority motion, which is calling the question.
So for my notes,
Yeah.
that happened before we called the question?
Yeah, yes, in order of priority, yes.
That That's what I want to get clear, is how to put this in my notes.
This is weird.
So, and I
I go back to my
apologize.
statement. This is all clear
This
as
is an
mud.
unusual one.
It is.
Roberts is supposed to make things easier.
Where's Mr. Roberts at, anyway?
Yeah, he deserves to be kicked.
Okay,
So now we're back to, we're voting on the call to question.
correct.
Got it.
So once I announce roll call and I vote, we'll stop discussion if there is 6 of you who agree to do that.
The one question that I have, though, is just to make sure that the motion on the table is what I had stated, correct?
It's not on the table right now because we have a call to question.
Okay, but that's.
But if that
then we're
is
going to immediately
approved,
vote
then we
on that,
immediately
so-
vote on the motion that you made and was seconded by Commissioner
We'll have Al read it back.
Johnson or something
Thank
like
you.
that.
Now I feel the heat again. No, I apologize. Go ahead.
All right, roll call.
And again, just to clarify, now we're voting on calling the question. Minor,
Aye.
Schramm,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Villanueva,
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Brunick,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Mybom,
No.
Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. So we move immediately to the motion that was brought up by Commissioner Brunick.
To clarify, and so that Mr. Brunick is comfortable and so is everybody else voting, the motion is to fund 2 permanently now and address the other 2 during the normal budgeting process unless, or if Friends of Sertoma or somebody else comes forward with 9,000 more to fund it, then we do it all. Correct? Got it.
Yes.
And since we did a call to the question, there is no discussion. Roll call.
Aye.
Excuse me, I didn't have my speaker on. Schramm,
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Brunick,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Mybom,
Aye.
Minor,
Aye.
Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. Number 3 under old business is consideration of memorandum 23-11 regarding the request of a special events retail on-sale liquor license for one day, January 21st, 2023, from Ben's Brewing Company, Ben Hanton, owner, located at 222 West 3rd Street, for an event at the NFAA located at 800 Archery Lane. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Weber,
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Brunick.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Mybom,
Aye.
Minor,
Aye.
Schramm. Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to new business in the agenda. Number 1 is consideration of memorandum 23-01 regarding the lease of Unit 2 of a city-owned T-hangar at Chan-Gurney Municipal Airport to Mr. Scott Olson. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Villanueva,
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Brunick.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. Number 2 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-02 regarding music at the Meridian Concert Series. If considered tonight and approved, this is the 7th season and will take place the Thursdays of July and the first 3 in August. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Benson,
Aye.
Brunick.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber,
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. Number 3 under new business is Kids in the Park. Consideration of memorandum 23-03 regarding Kids in the Park summer event. Just to remind the commission, this is going in its third season. Would take place the Saturdays in June, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. at the Huther Family Aquatic Center. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. And I would say to Mr. Yeomans and to Mr. Larson, thank you for putting all of the work into these series. I think it's a great addition for our community in the summer, but now you get to work, so thanks for that. Number 4 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-04 regarding the lease of unit number 1 of city-owned T-hangars at Chan-Gurney Municipal Airport to Mr. Jake Hoffner. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 5 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-05 regarding the abatement write-off request for the property at 1402 Ash Street, located within the city of Yankton jurisdiction. This would be in the amount of $2,040.63. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 6 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-16 regarding engineering design services for runway 20 turnaround at the Chan-Gurney Airport. This is for KLJ Engineering in the amount of $17,898.17. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 7 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-07 regarding a 2023 sidewalk cafe permit application at 301 East 3rd Street, doing business as the Boathouse. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 8 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-08 regarding a 2023 sidewalk cafe permit application at 102 and 104 East 3rd Street, doing business as Mojo's 3rd Street Pizza, and adopting Resolution 23-01, declaring the proposed boardwalk extension a portion of the public sidewalk. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Weber.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 9 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-17 regarding ordinance 1068 restricting camping within the Yankton city limits, and establish a public hearing for the second reading of ordinance 1068 for January 23rd, 2023. Can I get an introduction?
Introduced.
Thank you. And number 10 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-09, setting the date for the proposed annual city commission election and agreeing to combine with the Yankton School District should they have an election. The date in your commission packet is setting April 11th, 2023 as said date. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Aye.
Thank you. Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. That concludes our items under new business. Moving on to other business. There is no other business in front of the city commission tonight, so with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss contractual litigation and personal matters under SDCL 1-25-2.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody abstaining? All right, we are adjourned into executive session.